They're going to intro, right?
Oh, I guess we can start.
Oh, that was the intro. Okay, now I'll do intro. I'll do intro again. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and wider public who just happened to be here. If you want to join, you may join as well. I think there's one more seat right in front. Yeah. Hi, my name is Ruiming, and I'm a friend of Thomas. And what Thomas does is that he runs a very popular investment blog in Singapore called Steady Compounding. So on the blog, you learn how. I mean, apart from like personal finance, you also learn how to invest, how to spot companies, all that sort of stuff. Is that right, Thomas?
Yeah, I think this guy is a little bit too humble. So this is He Ruiming. He's the co-founder of Woke Salaryman. For those of you who have Instagram, it's a very popular page, close to 1 million people.
Oh, thank you. Wait. The first applause should be for Thomas. So a round of applause for Thomas, please. Okay, so the first time I met Thomas, right, was actually during COVID, where like we did one of those like 5 people gatherings. Then I met Thomas. He's just this very serious guy talking about CAGR and compounding. So I didn't know like he would become one of my best friends, right? Because the more I met him, I'm gonna sit away because I keep hearing the reverb. It's a bit weird. Alright, thank you. So the more I met him, I realized we share very similar values, and though he's an active investor, I'm more in the passive camp. So anyway, I prepared a list of questions, and I'm not a professional moderator, so I'll go straight into the questions. Thomas not paying me. I want to disclaim that Thomas have seen none of these questions, and there are some spicy ones. So if he struggle a bit, you can cut him some slack, huh? So Thomas, you can always skip if you are comfortable.
Wow, that's very kind.
Yeah.
I never went through a moderation that can skip questions.
You just blink with your both eyes. Then I was like, okay. Also, I want to disclaim like these questions are non-ChatGPT questions. Like I came out of it when I was in the toilet. Yeah. So actually like I had a first batch, then I lost it. Then I came out of it last night again. Okay, so anyway, I just go straight into it. Any questions? There'll be like a Q&A later on. You guys can add on to those questions. So the first question, right, is about actually about social mobility in Singapore. So Thomas, you grew up in like a not so comfortable background, right? And so every time when we talk about personal finance, very often there'll be this comment. People will often ask us to read like Teo Yo Yen's book, like What Inequality Looks Like. But I always find it a bit amusing, right? Because for people like Thomas, right, he never really needed like a book to tell him like the lived reality of going through a certain tough time. I mean, no disrespect to this What Inequality Looks Like. It's a great book, bestseller by the way. Yeah, so I want to know, how do you think that shaped you as a person and how it affected your views on money?
Yeah, I think like for those of you who already bought and read chapter 1, right, I go quite a bit into what shaped my money beliefs. And I think since when I was young, it was very common whereby, my power will get cut off, water will get cut off. When I go to school, the teachers will ask me like, hey, the school fees is due for like maybe 4 or 5 months. You got to pay it. And I think the way it shaped me was that those days, right, were very tough. And going through life right now, I honestly cannot think of anything that's tougher than those days. So what it happens is, no matter how tough life gets, I always think that it can never be as tough as those days. And there was one thing that stuck with me through those very, very dark days. It was this quote, which is actually from Henry Ford. And he says something like this: whether you think you can or you cannot, you are correct, right? You are going to be right about your beliefs, whether you think you can or you cannot. And I think when I grew up with my peers, a lot of them are actually very, very brilliant. And the challenge for a lot of them wasn't, they didn't have the capacity or competency to go and achieve things that they want to achieve. But the problem was that, they sort of have this limitation on their mind, like I cannot do this, I cannot aim high, or the dreams aren't big enough because, nobody taught them how to think big. And I think when I first learned about that concept, I always tell myself, no matter how I feel about certain things, right? Whether it's imposter syndrome or whether it's that voice inside me that tells me I'm not good enough, I always tell myself like, if I put enough hard work into any single thing, I will always be able to achieve whatever I want to achieve, right? And that was the case when, the publisher first looked for me in 2022 to write this book. I kept thinking to myself, this is a publisher from London, right? And they have handled a lot of bestsellers, like Morgan Housel, for example, who sold over 8 million copies. So when the editor who edited Morgan Housel book came to me, I was like thinking, like, what does he want to do with me? Like, who am I to write a book? But this is a mantra that I carry from since my early childhood. Yes, that voice will be in your head, but you do it anyway. Yeah.
But there are also like a good many deal of people from the income bracket who also struggle to have that positive mindset. And I guess it's understandable. But from your experience, what would you say are like some very tangible reasons why they find it difficult?
I think it was largely the kind of dreams or that people around them or maybe their parents don't talk to them about to go and dream big. I realized like a lot of times when I talk to my friends about hey, let's go to NUS open house, for example, a lot of my friends would just tell me I won't be able to compete against people from so and so school, right? And I think they were defeated even before they tried. And the truth of the fact is, I know they have it in them, to go out and go there and achieve, right? So I really think a lot of it is mindset, and it comes a lot from surrounding people around you who talk about how big your dreams is, and when you surround yourself with people who dream really huge, right, you sort of will just get pulled up along together with it.
Yeah, I like that because I think in recent years in Singapore, there's a lot of focus on like the systemic stuff, like the stuff preventing the low income groups from like having social mobility. But I think very often like this type of conversation strips away like the agency that these groups have because these are not like a monolithic group that everyone do have agency. And I think you are an example that actually having agency, having like the right mindset does play a part. Okay, next question. Okay, ready? So in this book, right, you talk about how your life started to turn when you go to poly and you managed to get a IRA scholarship. So I don't know whether this is in the book, but sometimes you tell me that because in Ngee Ann there was like a great library, Ngee Ann Poly, best poly, yeah. You could read like a lot of books, and then that's where you managed to grow your knowledge, and it actually gave you the idea and get to investing. But if you look at youth today, I think Singapore, you're like 30 what now?
36.
36 now. So you think like that ladder today, the ladder that you climbed back then, do you think it still exists today in a Singapore where a lot of jobs are being offshored, and also like competition is higher, right? Because now everyone has the internet, not just you, right? Last time you got library was a very big deal, but then now like the whole world has the library. I mean, of course they can use it to play Mobile Legends also, but that's beside the point. So do you think that the same idea of like social mobility or the ladder they climb still exists for Singaporeans today, young Singaporeans today?
Yeah, so I learned a lot about investing from reading books from library and also like from visiting Kinokuniya. So fun story, the year 2007, around October, I actually came here to interview for a job, to put up books on the shelf. And when the interviewer asked me, like why do you want to work at Kinokuniya? I told them, as a matter of fact, I'm here for your staff discount. I believe it's around 20 to 30%. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, so I'm, like back then they accepted me, but unfortunately my friend didn't get accepted. So I ended up going to Metro to work. But I think a lot of, when it comes to social mobility, the books are out there, YouTube is out there. And really the way I learned back then was just to sit in the library the entire day, right? Not just to read about investing books, but also it could be history, it could be psychology. And back then when I couldn't afford textbook, I had to sit in the library because textbook you cannot borrow out, right? So just sat in the library all the way. And I think it's even better today because, you not just have books, you have YouTube, but you also have AI, right? And I think AI is just a powerful tool for people to bridge that gap. I've always felt like technology is a great leveler. Like if you don't have tuition teacher, you always have ChatGPT, right? For $20 a month. Then you get access to a lot of this world-class education, to challenge your thoughts, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I want to challenge you like a little bit, just a little bit, right? So I think like when it comes to investing or wealth building, I think many of us will agree that having wealthy parents definitely help, right? And I think we're in like a later stage of capitalism now that, the generation, there are people who get to inherit like large sums of money from their parents and use that as initial capital to start investing. And then of course they can go on to say like, oh no, this is, I made all this money myself, right? But I think like when you had no capital, right, how do you raise that first capital in the beginning, and how do you think people can continue to do that today, in the previous economic, climate that we described earlier?
Yeah, so I mean, I remember when I first started investing, I was 18 years old, and I remember how much I invested. It was $2,800, right? And when I first invested, I made a lot of mistakes that a lot of beginner investors make, right? I was checking the stock prices all the time, every 15 minutes. And mind you, this was during the time whereby mobile phone app doesn't exist. So I need to find somewhere to connect to Wi-Fi. Then I need to open my laptop. Then I need to log in. I need to go and check. But I think like when it comes to building wealth, the best time to start is when you have very, very little, right? Because then the tuition that you have to pay is also minimal, right? Because a lot of times if you were to start investing with a large sum straight away, right? You don't know what you don't know. And you don't want yourself to be take too big of a hit to your portfolio when you're just starting out, especially when you're investing wise, you haven't learned how you will handle volatility, so on and so forth. Yeah. So I mean, in the book, I share one lesson that's actually shared with me by Chin Hui Leong. I think he's here today. The lesson was actually this, right? If you were to take 2 years to save up this amount of capital, use at least half the time. So you use at least 1 year to deploy this capital, right? And the reason is this, right? A lot of times the way we feel about volatility and how we react to volatility, right? Drawdown, do I panic sell? And what, does it impair my decision making? A lot of times it's tied to your income or how long it takes for you to save this money, right? So this rule of thumb, use half the amount of time you take to save the money to slowly deploy, right? Don't deploy everything all in one shot. It's a pretty good rule of thumb.
My brain a bit slow. Can you explain the half the time rule again? Sorry.
Yeah, I think like so like if you were to take 2 years to save this money,
Okay.
right? Use at least 1 year to deploy it, rather than like all in one shot into one stock, right? Then if you are, especially if you are a new investor and the stock market start going into drawdown after that, you don't know how you will behave.
So. Okay, next question. Next section already. I'm moving on to about companies and ethics, right? So when I was reading the book, a lot of companies that you talk about investing and the ones that you actually think have good management are also the ones accused of antitrust and like ruining the planet. I mean, just like for example, there's Amazon, Jeff Bezos going to space, there's Meta, right? Please don't cancel my page, Zuckerberg. Yeah. So, in fact, some of the corporate actions you described, such as like share buybacks, right, are also said to further or worsen inequality. So my question is like, in a world where we need to consider like ethics and a broader picture, because some people say we do not have much time left as a species based on the longevity of the planet. Like, how do you reconcile these pushbacks in an era where shareholder value is kind of a bit of a dirty word? I mean, I'm sure you've seen the memes, right? You say like, oh no, I'm not going to OT until 11 p.m. tonight for shareholder value. I mean, you've seen those. Yeah. So how do you reconcile being like a share investor and also seeing like the broader picture like that?
I think that's a fantastic question, because I think in recent times, if you were to look at the US market as a whole, right, very frequent politicians, a couple of them, they like to use share buybacks or the ultra rich to try and say that, hey, this is bad, we should impose more tax of them or implement, because like they're damaging businesses and so on and so forth. But if we were to look at if we were to learn how to read the financial or go through, know where to find the earnings transcript, go to the primary sources rather than rely on sensational headlines like this, like Bernie Sanders say Meta is evil, right? One very quick experiment, like I like to use when it comes to whether companies like this, do they destroy small businesses. If you look at Meta during 2020, around June, they actually got boycotted by all the big corporate companies, whether it's Coca-Cola or Unilever, and so on and so forth. Very, very big brands. And when that boycott happened, it actually did not affect the company one bit. So 1,000 big companies all pull out from Facebook, Instagram advertisement, did not affect the company one bit. The revenue continued to grow. Why? Because when it comes to advertising on Instagram or Facebook, a lot of times it is small businesses who are advertising on these platforms. So, as investors, if we were to go direct to the source, we would know that big players, whether it's Shopify, whether it's Amazon, or whether it's Meta, they're actually enabling and giving a lot of these small businesses a chance to come out and compete in this world. But what's happening, of course, right now is that, things are shifting from physical to digital, right? And so we see a lot of new businesses given a shot to thrive there. Otherwise, if you were to think back, long, maybe 2 decades ago, the only way a new business can come out and do well is, I need to be able to afford a giant advertisement on newspaper or TV, which many of them simply cannot afford. But, a lot of this digital business nowadays, they actually give them a fighting chance, right? And so it's actually, I think, they create a lot more jobs for a lot of these small businesses.
Thank you for your spirited defense of Amazon and Meta, right? But I guess this begs like a follow-up question. So, when it comes to deploying capital, do you see it as like, do you take into account like ethics, or is it purely on numbers?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. So one of the things I talk about in the book is that if we want a company to do well in the long run, it not only must do well for the shareholders, for the business, but also for society at large. Otherwise, if you look at companies, gaming companies, for example, casino and all that gambling, not that great for the society. Usually regulations will come in and clamp them down sooner or later. So when it comes to investing, especially the lunch break investor style, whereby we want to buy great businesses, leave it there for them to compound over the long term. And we don't want to monitor them all the time. We want businesses that's great for society as a whole. So if you look at a company like Costco, for example, right? Low prices. The whole value proposition is giving low prices to consumers, and giving businesses to all these suppliers. So, it creates a win-win-win kind of situation. And that is the kind of businesses we want to own.
In answer, is it purely numbers or you take into account ethics? So yes, you take into account ethics.
Yeah. So they must do right for the entire ecosystem.
Okay.
Right? That's the best kind of business to own. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so the next section is about strictly investing, the more nerdy stuff I'll say, but I'll just go straight into it. So, I mean, since we're in a Singaporean bookstore, and many Singaporeans prefer dividend stocks over growth stocks. Like, what are some of your theories here?
Yeah, I think when I say dividend stock in Singapore, a lot of people would actually love that idea because I think it is a simple idea to impart or a simple idea to sell. But there's a lot of nuances. And I think dividends overall is good, but it depends, right? And there's multiple shades of grey, which I try to talk about in this book. And when it comes to dividend, right, I think it depends on the kind of phase we are in. Are we in a phase whereby we need the cash flow at the moment? Because ultimately, a company has a few choices when it comes to handling their capital. When a company makes money, I can either invest in more of the business to grow the business, or I can actually give it out to shareholders. And companies that give all these dividends out back to shareholders usually has nothing better to do with shareholders. I mean, all this capital. So one example you look at is Singpost, right? Singpost will definitely give out all their money to shareholders. But is it a great stock to own? Not exactly, right? If you look at the share price, it's just one line down. You will get a lot of dividends, but you will lose a lot of capital as well. So it's not just enough to look at dividend yield alone. We always want to look at total shareholder returns. And when it comes to Singapore especially, I think we always want to think of capital appreciation, that means your share price rising, and also the dividends that are coming in. And especially for younger people, right? If you are working today, you have a steady flow of income, and you do not need this passive cash flow at the moment, right? I would much rather businesses reinvest it for me, right? Because the thing about compounding is you always need to put the money back into work. If today they are giving it to me as dividends, then I have the additional responsibility of finding another investment to put the money back into. But let's say if a company like Starbucks, maybe back in the early 1990s or 2000, they open every single new store, the returns is around 20 to 30%. So it takes about 2 to 3 years for them to break even. If I have a company like that, I'll tell Starbucks, go and invest as much as you can, right? Then the share price will just go one straight line up. Because the more they reinvest, the more earnings they bring in, right? The returns on capital is extremely high. But for a business that not very profitable, don't earn very high returns on capital, then I would say give it to me as dividends, right? Especially if I'm in a phase whereby I need all this passive cash flow.
I think one of the epiphanies I had while reading a book is that you talk a lot about US companies. And the US, I think they are generally almost, not, I wouldn't say homogeneous, but they are, the market in East Coast is very similar to that in the West Coast. And that allows businesses to expand quickly, across the entire country. So you capture the whole US market, and that's why you have big companies, and that's why it makes sense to reinvest those dividends to grow. But I think like the epiphany I had was that Singapore is a very small market. So we grew until a certain size and then we're like, oh, cannot grow anymore because growing to Southeast Asia, you need to adapt your market, your product to have like the different audience, and they may not always grow there. So because they kind of like cannot grow to a certain size, so they give out those dividends.
Yeah, I think like if you were to look at companies like Old Chang Kee or maybe Songfa Bakute, they tried expanding overseas, going to Indonesia to sell curry puff, very challenging. Going to Malaysia to sell curry puff, very challenging. So I think the point on America having a relatively homogeneous market, right? If someone like coffee in Seattle, very likely they can sell in New York as well. That's why like when we look at companies in this kind of big markets, the growth runway is a lot more significant.
So in a very interesting way, actually, like geography is destiny. I mean, like Singapore's size also like determines what kind of like stock market can exist here, right? Okay, so another stock market related question about Singapore. Talk about investing in Singapore market, and like the same few names can come up, like SQR, DBS. These are all like the classic Singapore stocks people want to invest in. And to go further, right, many people will buy all these like blue chip stocks because I mean, I always hear like impressions two things. Like one is like the business will never collapse, like won't 倒闭, right? And 倒闭 means collapse, right? Or like they'll always say like, oh, the government will prop it up somehow. So what are your thoughts of investing in this manner?
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, I met my lecturer, right? He was my lecturer back in Polytechnic days. And I saw him, he's still in working clothes holding a briefcase. Then I asked him, like, why are you still working? Just joking. I said, you also old already, why are you still working? I thought you should be financially free already.
Oh, a bit koi lah.
then he tell me, like, he looked at me, then he shake his head, then he say, this 2-syllable word, high flux. Yeah. Any one of you know high flux? I assume most of you know high flux. But anybody lost money in high flux? Okay, great. So you're not one of the 10,000 Singaporean investors who lost money in high flux. So the thing is high flux, right? It is one of the blue chip as well. And I think back then a lot of investors also think, like the government will prop this up. Like the Temasek or GIC is invested, but actually they already sold already. But a lot of people never update their information. And then, if I'm a wealth manager, what a lot of them told them was, wow, this company hyper profitable. So if you were to look at earnings, this company very profitable, a lot of earnings. But one thing I say in my book is that earnings is an opinion, but cash is a fact, right? And a lot of times when we are looking at investment, companies that appear profitable may not have cash coming in as well. So you need to know where to look exactly, right? And so for my lecturer, he invested a heavy 6 figures into this stock, right? Because like the yield was, for some reason, even for my lecturer, he teach finance, so he know how to read one. He was just very attracted to this 4-5% interest payment, right? This yield, and then he put a lot of money, and then he just lost everything. So doesn't matter whether it's blue chip or what. I think, or even like if you were to buy bonds of company, there are a lot of bonds that actually went kaput in Singapore. Whether it's SWIBOR, whether it's NOL, I think Singapore has one of the highest bond default rate. So you always need to learn how to read financials, whether you're investing in the stock market or whether you're investing in fixed income instrument. You always need to go to the source and find. And the truth is, it's actually not very difficult once you know where to find. Like within 5 minutes, I know where to find, and I will know whether to stay away or just maybe perhaps I can consider.
Well, thank you for the long elaboration. Yeah. But if you all want to buy bonds and don't worry about the debtor paying back, you can always look into Singapore savings bonds because Singapore government is rated AAA by Moody's and Standard & Poor's. This is not a sponsor post by MAS. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, back you're talking about like reading like the statements and everything, right? So I'm a passive investor, so I just buy like a broad global index. I just call it a day and I just lepak somewhere, right? But sometimes we think like active investors like yourself are a bit arrogant for thinking they can beat the market, right? So, I see some people laughing already, yeah. So respectfully, right, what is your comeback? I give you the opportunity to, give a comeback.
Wow, this guy really not holding back. Okay, so like I think when it comes to active investing, you need both sides of the coin. You need to be both arrogant and also humble at the same time. Arrogant because like when you're investing, you're always trying to tell the market, I believe there's alpha, I believe there's money to be made in this stock. So it often happens in times whereby it looks very ugly. So, if you think back, if any of you invest in the stock market, you know that maybe the year 2022, Meta, right, Facebook was very, very ugly. A lot of people thought that the company was going to be disrupted because Apple iOS was hindering the company, cannot do targeting. Or Netflix, because one quarter subscribers dropped, then everybody started running away. So in that sense, you need to know what to focus on, right? Has this investment been permanently busted, right? Is this a permanent decline or is this just something temporary? And then that's where we need to act with conviction and say like, hey, I think the market is missing out on something. And at those moments, when this opportunity come, because the market is always very, very short-sighted. And if you are able to do your own due diligence and build your own conviction, you will be able to see quite clearly, there's a very big divergence in value right here. And this is where I'm going to call bluff on the market, right? Things is not as bad as it seems. Like Netflix, one quarter drop. But if I were to look at, every other companies out there post-COVID, whether it's gaming company, whether it's e-commerce company, all of them have a slowdown, right? Because everybody is going out to shopping centers, coming to retail mall, and not just staying in front of your digital life, right? So that quarter drop was acceptable. And once you are able to see that and know that it's temporary, then I think the kind of big returns that could really supercharge your wealth, those opportunities are there, right? And then to the humble side of things, when it comes to investing, right, I always tell people you can't be extremely concentrated. And when I say concentrated, that means people who own like 3 to 5 stocks. I think that one is a recipe for disaster because you are not giving yourself any room for mistakes. When it comes to investing, it's not possible to get everything correct one. And I think if you are able to get 6 out of 10 things correct, I think you will do very well as an investor, right? Because the whole thing about investing is the most you can lose in any single stock is 100%. But the most you can make in any stock theoretically is infinite, right? If you were to buy Facebook in 2022, I think you would have made 5-6 times your money, right? Or if you were to buy Google, just maybe like 2 years back, when everybody was saying AI is going to disrupt Google, and then you are a Google user yourself, YouTube very sticky, Google Drive very sticky, you know that this platform is not going to get disrupted so quickly. You would also have made a few times your money. Then I think those successes, provided we actually don't sell these winners, we're more than cover up for these losers. And there's this saying by Peter Lynch, which I like a lot, right? In investing, we don't want to cut our flowers to water the weeds, right? We always want to remember this, like we don't want to trim our winners and pour them to the losers, right? Let the winners run.
Sounds good. So again, if you guys look into your own stocks, look at your own financials and develop the conviction into, actually holding through when the stuff looks bad, then Thomas is your guy, you can look at the book. Okay, last but not least, not really. I know that sounded like an ending question, but be patient, right? So last but not least, the title is called Lunch Break Investor. So I know you don't have a Bloomberg terminal at home because very expensive, yeah. So for the person who works full time and has maybe like 1 hour a day, like what do you recommend the hour look like?
Yeah, I mean, so I interned at Bloomberg before. One terminal costs about 20 to 30K a month, so it's crazy expensive. And I think when it comes to the lunch break investor, most of us have better things to do. Like we either have a job, you have family, so on and so forth. The last thing we want to do is we want to look at extremely complicated companies. And one thing I realized when I go out and meet investors is that they are always attracted by very, very complicated ideas. And in investing, we are not being paid for complexity, right? Great investment don't need to be very complex one, right? Netflix, everybody out here would know what Netflix actually do, right? They just charge a subscription for you to watch show. Very simple business model. Or whether it's Starbucks. You don't need to go after SK Hynix, or you don't need to go after Micron, you don't need to go after Nvidia, things that we do not understand, but because they are actually hogging all the headlines now, a lot of investors are always very drawn to these investments. But if I were to ask them, do you know what SK Hynix does? They don't really know. Right? They'll just say that memory, now got big shortage, memory prices going up. But they won't be able to know the intricacies of what these companies are doing. So when it comes to investing, especially if we don't want to spend a lot of time, but still grow our wealth, we want to look at businesses we are already familiar with, right? Don't need very, very sophisticated business model. You want to look at, whether these companies have a competitive advantage. And most importantly, the ultimate big question that we want to answer is, why does this company deserve to be bigger 5 to 10 years from today, right? Because ultimately, share price is going to follow your fundamentals. And we want to make sure that we are able to reasonably predict with good certainty, that this company is able to grow 5 to 10 years from today?
Thomas, I got a question. What does Netflix actually? No, I'm kidding. Okay, so we're almost at the end of like me interview him. So now it's for you guys to ask him questions. So before we take questions from the audience, I want to ban like a few types of questions that we always get at these like personal finance things. I'll start, some of them are like, is this now a good time to buy? No, you cannot ask this question. What do you think of so and so stock? No, you also cannot ask this question. What do you think of like Mumu, IBKR? No, you cannot ask this question also. But any other questions? Okay, so I shall open this to the floor. Any questions, anyone? Okay, there's a guy over there.
Hey, go ahead, Ashwin.
First of all, congratulations, Thomas. I first met Thomas about 4 years ago. My name is Ashwin. And I think I was one of the few people who asked, like, when are you writing a book? So really nice to see the book in hand now. Question about gold in general. I understand that. Question about gold in general, right? Like, how do you see that in general as a diversification or a hedge? I mean, knowing you, I know you're not a big fan of gold because of various reasons. But then there's also this philosophy that it's kind of bet the index in the last 15 years. It's somewhat simpler than any other investment out there.
Okay.
So your thoughts around that, as well as diversification in general.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to gold, right, my dad cannot shut up about gold. So he can only keep talking about gold prices, so and so forth. But if you look at gold as an investment before this very recent run up, right, it actually hasn't performed very well as an investment. And if you would ask me, like, how do you want to value a piece of gold? Basically, it's just based on supply and demand. But if I were to look at something that is able to bring in cash flow, right, then I'm in a better position to evaluate that, right? I think the mic is a bit testing. Yeah, okay, awesome. Yeah, so I think like when it comes to valuing something like gold or even crypto or even art, right? A lot of it is, we are trying to forecast what the demand is going to be like for this asset class, right? Is there someone else who's here to actually take over from me? And I think if you are going to invest in precious metals, the key thing you want to study always is supply, right? But demand is very, very hard to forecast. And I think when it comes to Warren Buffett, right, he actually does invest in precious metals sometimes. And the way he chooses the timing to invest in metals like this is when the cost of production is currently higher than what the price of these precious metals are. Then to him, it becomes a no-brainer investment, right? But other than that, generally he would stay away from investments like this. Yeah.
Okay, next question. Oh, Jia Hong. Yeah, you pass it. Yeah, thank you.
Hi Thomas, firstly congrats on the successful release of your book. So I got two broad questions here. Firstly, I just want to understand a bit more about your process, which would be, how would your process differ for a copy that you just met for the first time recently versus a copy that you have been following for some time? That's the first broad topic. And the second broad topic I have here is, you earlier shared a case about Meta in 2022. So I want to ask this question on how do you know that whether a business is permanently impaired versus a business that is just going through a brief difficult time?
Sorry, I didn't catch the first question.
How does your process differ for a company that you just met and just added to your position recently
Company.
versus a company that you have been following for some time?
Okay. Right, I think like when it comes to first analyzing a company, usually that takes a bit more work, right? Because I'm trying to figure out what the various most important segments are, right? What drives revenue, so on and so forth. So, there's a bit of time into studying the business model and also studying competition. But today with AI, it's a lot faster because I can go through like multiple years of information very, very quickly and know very where to zoom in on. When it comes to the second question, that's a very good question. So when it comes to a company going through temporary turbulence, right, I think we need to learn to focus on what actually drives the competitive advantage of companies like this. So, in one of the chapters of the book, I would actually talk about, Meta having the competitive advantage of network effect, right? Very simply, it just means that the more people on this platform, the more valuable this company is, right? The most simple example to think of is telephone, right? If I only I myself have a telephone, right, then the telephone is useless, right? I got no one to call. But if today I got your number, I got your number, I got everybody's number, then suddenly this thing becomes very valuable, right? Becomes valuable to me. So for a social media platform, right, like Meta, then what we want to look at is we want to keep track of, how many people are on Instagram, are on Facebook, so on and so forth. So they actually report a metric, which is also actually very easy to find, which I'll cover in the book. What's the daily active users is like. Then we are able to focus on all these metrics to see whether the competitive advantage of this company is expanding or declining, right? So the most recent quarter, if you were to look at Snapchat actually declining. I think in USA, it declined about 7%. Then I would say this company, I would stay away from it, right? Because there's a danger of the competitive advantage starting to unravel. Yeah. So every single company got different set of competitive advantage, right? But largely there are 6, which are all covered in the book. And then you will know very quickly what are the key things to focus on, right? For something like maybe a Hermes branding, what are the metrics to focus on? Yeah.
Next.
Hey, go ahead.
So you talked about growing up was tough, and I'm not sure if you mentioned something about when after you grew up, when you were growing up, whether it was still tough, and if you could give advice on give advice on how people can deal with this, how people can deal with tough times in their life. Maybe maybe for people who are children, and maybe also for people who are grown up, and also maybe people who are very high level career people, also maybe people who are semi-retired. People go through some tough times and things. And also, if you could talk a little bit more about your childhood, it seems very character building, very interesting, how you go from a small thing to somebody sitting here in a bookstore, signing away autographing your very own book.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for the question. I think especially, okay, so I think the question is, going through, tough times in my childhood, do I have any advice for people going through similar situation? And I mean, the reality of things is things are going to be very, very harsh. And, in the previous CNA interview, I actually said this one thing, like I will never ever want to go back to where I was before. And I think that largely informed the way I invest, right, and think about how I manage my money. And when it comes to going through situation like this, I think it takes sort of like a blind faith that things will become better eventually. And I always have this belief that if I keep growing as a person, if I need to suffer, I just need to keep grinding through, and eventually things will be better. And I would say when you're going through dark days, it certainly wouldn't feel that way, right? Things would feel very bad, and there are many, many days whereby I would feel like giving up. But I think when I look at it could be my mother or it could be my family, and then I always tell myself that I need to grind through everything. Right? I need to grind through everything. But yeah, there's no easy way out. And I think going to the library was my way of sort of escaping into another world, because when I'm looking for role models in my life, there wasn't a lot, right? So when I go to the library or when I come to Kinokuniya, I will pick up autobiography of great people, right? And I think that's where I learn, how to grow as a person and how to go in the right direction. And I think those books has been a key inspiration for me growing up. Yeah.
I think, can I answer your Q&A?
Hey, please go ahead.
Yeah. So I think one of the things Thomas always tells me is always build the capacity to suffer, and I always kept that with me. If you all know Thomas, Thomas lives quite a very simple life. Like really simple life is not the kind of simple life then you go fly business class, every 3 years. It's not that kind of simple life. Like real simple life, we always say at hawker center, our activities just like go out, go to the gym and everything. So I also found that because he has such a simple life, a simple life is also a durable life because the more moving parts your life have, the more addicted you are to like the feeling of success or like nice, like pleasurable things. Like the easier or more for your life to fall apart, the more fragile it becomes. Okay, sorry, I answered.
So great response.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Next question, please. Okay, there's a guy behind.
Hi Thomas, number one, congratulations again on the launch of the book. My name is Edwin. So I think to be very frank, I'm a very fresh beginner investor. I spent most of my early 20s just playing it away, so it's starting to get a bit serious. My question is, like you mentioned, the advantage we have with technology, with AI, with the wealth of knowledge at our fingertips. But with the same thing, it's a bit of a choice paralysis, right? You hear about so many strategies, whether index funds, ETFs, dividend portfolio, or for yourself even like investing in companies for the long term. I think what I'm trying to ask is, as an advice, what would you give advice to a fresh investor coming into the market? I just got my first job, right, at the same time. So I think, like in my mindset, it's like, well, should I just portion a bit of money in each strategy, or should I just go hard on like maybe choose three and go hard? But yeah, I'm just a bit lost here.
Yeah, I think, Edwin, that's a great question. And I think Ruiming, for those who just joined us, this is He Ruiming from Woke Salaryman, about 1 million followers on Instagram. Yeah, yeah, so like, I think great question, especially for someone who's just entering the workforce. I think we always need to be very honest with ourselves when we are investing in the stock market, right? And the number one is, do we have the spare time? And also, more importantly, do we have the interest to actually go and learn about what we are investing in or not? Because I think when we are investing just based on other people's stock tips or advice, buying just based on what social media, TikTok is saying, then I think it becomes a little bit dangerous. What we want to do is we always want to make sure that, we understand these investments ourselves. Because when it comes to push come to shove, volatility happens. Only your own conviction can save you, right? Not other people. We can't invest on borrowed conviction. So if you are able to, put time and effort into learning about this investment, which is actually not difficult once you know. There's a bit of a learning curve at the start, but once you are invested in these companies and you've been keeping track of them for a while, it actually doesn't take a lot of time. And then, when it comes to indexing, that's a perfectly reasonable way to compound our wealth, right? I touch my heart, I got no interest in starting all these businesses, right? I can just automate, my salary every month, how much go into index fund, and then I can just go on and live my life, right? You got anything to add about?
You should first save, 3 to 6 months emergency fund, so in case the market tanks, you don't need to withdraw from your stocks to, pay your, your broken laptop or something. Can I add that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think insurance also must settle first, right? Especially if you're a young working adult, I think like hospitalization plan is the number one thing you need to go and get it sorted out. Always take care of the downside first. Once you take care of the downside, usually the upside will more than take care of itself. Yeah.
Thank you, Evan, for your question. Oh,
Just looking at looking at what's coming forward in the next few months or so, we've got so much uncertainty, geopolitics and everything else. And if you've also been following the banner cycle, the prediction is at the end of this year is that it's going to be a bad time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. The question is on, there's a lot of uncertainty coming up in the recent months. Then what should we as investors do? So, we will always feel that things are uncertain. I don't think I remember when I first started investing, people were worried about North Korea, people were worried about this. There's never a certain time. But I think what the key thing to take note is we want to invest in companies that can survive the test of time, right? And so in the book, I will talk about, we want to look at the balance sheet of company. Balance sheet meaning like how much cash this company owns. And then do they have a lot of debt? It's very hard for a company with no debt to go bankrupt, right? For you to lose your money entirely in companies that has zero debt, right? So we want to look at companies with a very resilient balance sheet, right? So they have very, very strong health. It's very much similar to, what Ruiming, was talking about. You must have 3 to 6 months of emergency cash. Then, the way to deal with uncertainty is always to build in this buffer into the businesses. So we want to focus on that when it comes to investing. But uncertainties-wise, I've always liked this saying, volatility is the price of admission into the stock market, right? To grow our wealth, we have to deal with these uncertainties. But you know what we can control when it comes to investing is invest when the price is right, right? So we always build in a margin of safety into our investment, right? Which is a key concept that the book covers also, right? How do we actually figure out the valuation of a company in a very quick manner, right? You don't need a lot of Excel spreadsheet, you don't need fancy mathematics, because we just need to roughly know, is this company fair value, undervalued, or overvalued? Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Okay, so now we've come to the end. It's 4:45, so we're going to be book signing now. But let's all give Thomas a round of applause. I assume there'll be a queuing up of sorts, or like the keynote people will handle it. Thank you.
Oh yeah, just one more quick thing, right? To thank all of you for coming down today, right? For every signature, not just walk away with the signature.
Hey,
so
how are you, Chris?
I think AI is all the hype right now. So I've actually prepared a bookmark. But the more important thing about this bookmark is this QR code.
I'm only his moderator.
So this QR code will
it's his-
give you an
it's his
AI
moment,
guide
right?
into the kind of prompts I
You should
use when it
enjoy
comes to researching company, so that it helps speed up the process, right? So you guys will get one of this, right?
Excuse me, we would like to take a photo with the author. So could you please, everyone who wants to be in the photo, please face my colleague over here for a group photo as well.
Oh, okay.
Stand at the front.
You should go in front.
Huh?